You're listening to the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman, episode 172. On today's Small and Supercharged podcast, I don't know how to introduce this lady, and I'm rarely lost for words. This is Claire Lomas, who I am sure you know. I was looking through, how to pull out the key points in Claire's career, and I don't know where to start. Claire had reached the very pinnacle of eventing, had been to Burley, and a horrific accident completely changed the course of her life. And I think, well, we're going to go into a lot more detail about this, but she's just an absolute inspiration. She walked the London Marathon despite being paralysed. She's raised coming up to £1 million for charity. I'm so excited to have her here. Claire, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Ria.
I just don't even know where to start with you, and that's not something I say very often. So, I mean, can you take us back to the beginning? Because you used to be a chiropractor as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So before my accident, I'd set up a clinic that I treated my patients from just part-time at home, and venting was my passion. And right from age 2 or 3, I was on ponies, and really got into the sport when I was about 13 and did pony trials and juniors. And yeah, and it wasn't many months before my accident that I was riding at Burley horse trials, and it felt like all my dreams were coming true. I actually went to school in Stamford, and the horse trials were the back of where I went to school. So it was my childhood dream, and had a really exciting future, I think, and some nice horses to ride. And yeah, goals were set high for the future.
Absolutely. I mean, I know Burley is like the Burley Badminton Kentucky. They are the pinnacle of the sport. I know you can obviously always improve and get better, but that just must be the most incredible feeling to have reached that level in the sport that you've dedicated so much time to.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was never going to be competitive there. But my top 2 horses were homebred horses from 2 local people that I'd ridden from babies, really, and brought on. And, they weren't great at the dressage, and one was quite a careless show jumper, but they were brilliant cross-country horses. So we managed to qualify and get there, but it felt like a huge achievement and quite surreal to be riding there after years of watching all the professionals doing it. And yeah, it was quite magical, really.
But then, as you say, the year after, wasn't it? 2007.
Yeah.
Everything took a very, very different turn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was planning to go back to Burley because it didn't actually go to plan. My stirrup iron, the bottom of my stirrup iron dropped out when my horse spooked at a fence quite early on, and he actually stopped at it, and my stirrup bashed against the fence. So I had to retire there, and it felt pretty disappointing as I walked back to the stables, but I was pretty determined that we'd be back there the following year. I had a lot of confidence in the horse. And then it wasn't to be, because on the 6th of May in 2007, I went off to Osberton horse trials, and I was riding the horse that I knew really well. And it was just a training run for Bramham coming up. The horse had competed at Bramham previous year. And yeah, it was a freak accident that really put all those plans and goals kind of out the window.
Completely. And I know that you've obviously I've read, well, I know you anyway, and I've read actually I think I'm going to see you speak at Osberton in October. But you described that period as your absolute darkest times. I can't even imagine what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a life change. It's so easy to take for granted everything you can do, and it's not just the bigger things like the eventing and walking, but actually far more than that, like just going and having a shower and feeling the water if you're soaking in a bath, or going for an evening out and being able to stand up with everyone else and get on the dance floor and all those kind of things. It stops everything, and you have to learn to catheterize because you can't feel or control your bladder anymore, or your bowel, and it comes with a whole load of issues, not just walking. So yeah, it wasn't without some really dark times of really not knowing what the hell you're going to do for the rest of your life. A lot of people think from the challenges, we no doubt talk about in a bit, that I've done like walking London Marathon. I think they were my toughest kind of challenges I've come across, but actually just getting out of bed when I had no reason to get up in those early days was a lot harder. And no, I didn't have real an aim or goal for quite a while, apart from just getting through every day. And that was particularly tough. You know, when you've got to get up, do the horses and fit in your patients, treating, and then, you know, go back and ride your horse and everything. I was living such an active, busy life, and then suddenly just to be left with a body that 2/3 of it didn't work. It was a massive life change.
Completely, but not one to be held back clearly. Oh my God, have you gone on and achieved amazing things that I imagine you wouldn't have achieved if you hadn't had the accident. So how did that journey kind of go from being in this very difficult place mentally and physically to achieving, I mean, the one that I know you've done so much, and I really want to talk about them all, because I know you're always, you know, you're doing things and you're so busy, but, you know, walking the London Marathon when you couldn't walk. So how did it go from there to there?
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. It takes quite a bit of time to come to terms with an injury like mine, or it certainly did for me anyway. But I basically did it by taking little opportunities. So things that wouldn't feel like anything to most people, like going out for lunch with friends. It's very easy to say no when you're feeling sad and sorry for yourself, and, you know, why me and stuff. I'd make myself go and do it, and usually felt better for it. And then I was offered a job in an office close to where I live, and it's through a mutual friend. And part of me felt angry. You think, why would you be angry? You've been offered a job. And I tell you the reason I'd be angry is because I could have done it when I was 16, and I'd done 4 years at university. And in some ways, it felt like I was really going backwards in life, but I had to go a little bit backwards in order to move on. So I took those opportunities, and it's a little bit like a jigsaw. To get the bigger picture, you've got to put all the little bits in. And those first few pieces are usually the hardest. And that was exactly the case. And, you know, it's gone on from there, but there are central pieces. And that's how I did it. I did it by making myself, often when I didn't feel like it, go and do these things. And it's led on to the bigger and more exciting things that I've done since.
So what was the first thing that you thought, yeah, I'm going to go for that? The first sort of, it's a big goal, but I completely appreciate what you're saying. Like the biggest goal, the biggest achievement can be those small, the steps that seem smaller. But when did you first kind of think, yeah, you know what, let's do this?
It was staggered, really. I mean, in the first year, for example, like I wasn't down all the time. I spent a lot of it having laughs with friends, you know. I got out there, and one of the things we did was the Event Riders Naked Calendar, and we had such a laugh. All these riders getting the kit off for me, who I'm sure didn't want to. I'm sure some did, but a lot of them didn't. And, you know, that was to raise money to help with my rehab. And it was really comforting as well to know that I had that kind of support. So there was lots of moments along my journey that made a massive difference. And also when I was in hospital, you know, I felt like my life had come to an end, really. But I also had moments where I felt incredibly lucky because I'd got use of my arms. And there's a lot of people in there with neck injuries who'd lost the use of their arms, and some even unable to breathe for themselves and having to use a ventilator, carers possibly for the rest of their lives. And that's when I decided to do what I could do to help cure paralysis. So I organised fundraisers as well. It started before the London Marathon on a smaller scale. But from doing that, you feel like you're doing something positive and helping others. So that's where it all began, really.
And I know that now you're kind of creeping towards raising 1 million, aren't you, for the charities that are really important to you? That must feel incredible.
Yeah, that'll be my next big milestone. I'm over 800,000, but it takes a lot of hard work and ideas and stuff. So it would probably be a few years, depending on what comes up between now and then. I mean, the London Marathon raised a lot of money, over 200,000, but that was quite a unique kind of situation with the suit, you know, that I used, being the first person in it in the UK and everything. It got a hell of a lot of media. But, you know, a lot of the events I do won't raise that kind of money. It's just plugging away. We collect at race days, organise events, do events myself. So I just keep plugging on and raising money, and eventually, yeah, it'd be a great celebration to get to the £1 million mark.
Definitely. So going back to the marathon, what made you think that, you know, what made you have that idea to do it? How did that all come about? Because you said you were the first person to Was it to own one of the?
Yeah, I own the suit and the first person in the Reebok suit in the UK. I was always quite focused on my rehab because although I knew my injury was severe, I was told it was highly unlikely I'd ever walk again. I knew that I wanted to give it my all and try and make any recovery I could, but in the worst case scenario, I wouldn't get any neurological gains, so no movement or sensation back from the chest down. But it would help keep me fit and healthy. So help prevent pressure sores and circulation problems and things that you can get from having a spinal cord injury. So I knew that I wanted to kind of keep doing that all my life, really. And I saw the suit on the internet and I thought it'd be a brilliant bit of kit as a rehab tool, but also as a fundraising thing that I could perhaps set a big goal. And that's exactly what I did. So with the help of the equestrian world, I managed to raise the money to get the suit in the first place, persuade a rehab centre to buy it in the UK, because I couldn't just go and buy a suit, you have to be trained. And then I took on the London Marathon in 2012.
And that took you 17 days to complete, didn't it, the London Marathon?
Yeah, when I got in the suit, I found it seriously difficult. Even just standing in it when you can't feel the ground beneath you, it's hard to trust your legs are there. And then each step was an effort, and I'd catch a foot often if the ground was slightly rough or the camber or slopes or anything. And the more I do that, the more would go through my arms. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't good at walking in the suit. I've got better since, but I've never really found it very easy because my injury level's quite high, so I don't have any stomach or back muscles that work. So my arms have to do a lot of work to keep my body upright and not flopping forward too much. So yeah, it was hard work, but I just thought every step would get me a step closer to the finish line.
I mean, such grit, because I think the London Marathon is just incredible for anyone that completes it, regardless of the fact that you can't, you can't walk and you're using this incredible bit of kit, and it took 17 days. I mean, that must have been absolutely exhausting.
It was, and it's physically hard for me. It was mentally difficult too, because I don't even know where my legs are. So I spent a lot of time, well, most of the time, looking down at my feet, because you use a suit by tilting your pelvis and you've got to get it right for each step. So it doesn't just walk for me. I have to get all this timing right and see how much to tilt, depending on whether we're going up a slope, down a slope and everything. So yeah, it was tiring having to concentrate on actually walking each step. It was difficult.
And you had like a really good support team around you, didn't you, when you were doing that as well?
Yeah, amazing. And I had different people join on different days. I had a physio that was based with the suit company. He came along, and Dan, my husband, did some of it with me, and then another guy as well helped, because I have someone walk behind me in case I lose my balance. And then like different people joining. Maisie, my daughter, was only about 18 months then, so she was there. She was trying to learn to walk about the same time as my training, so it was always a competition of who was going to grasp this walking lark first. She won, sadly, and then she soon got a lot better than me, left me behind. But so it was a good team out there, and those people joining really made it for me. It was, the walking, like we said, is tough and quite boring as well, because it's so slow, but the people around it and the donations coming in made it. And I will never forget that London Marathon journey. It was unbelievable. The training was a lot harder than the actual London Marathon, because you're not getting any closer to the finish line. But once I was on the London Marathon, I was on a mission.
Yes, I love that. And I know as well, you obviously just mentioned Maisie, but you had an 18-month-old at the time, which again would be difficult to do the London Marathon with an 18-month-old anyway, let alone with the suit. And you've gone on to have a second little girl as well, haven't you? Which is awesome.
Yeah. So Chloe, she's 4 now, and driving me mad at the moment, actually, after long summer holidays. But no, I'm very lucky to have my girls, and it's way more important than walking the London Marathon. Having Dan and Maisie in my life, and my family, my parents, and the support I've had is more important than any of the other things.
So another thing you did in 2012 is you lit the Paralympic cauldron for the 2012 games, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a very special day, actually. I didn't realise what a huge thing it was going to be, and I got there, and it was all on live TV, and very important occasion and very nerve-wracking as well, because I had to walk up in the suit, and it can go wrong. I had fallen flat on my face before, and I was like, oh God, I hope I can get this right. And then lifting the torch to light the cauldron, and the whole thing was very daunting, actually. I was probably more nervous there than leaving the start box at Burley. But, it's another opportunity that I wouldn't have had if it wasn't for that day that I thought had ruined my life back in May 2007.
Is that quite a weird thing to mentally process? That obviously the opportunities you've had are incredible, but they're not without their difficulties, and it's completely not what you expected. Is it quite mentally hard to sort of work that through, or did it used to be, or not really?
It's strange sometimes. Like, I do a lot of speaking events now, and often sharing my story at big conferences and stuff, mainly virtual at the moment, but hopefully, actually I've got my first in-person event on Saturday, so looking forward to that. But and every time I go through the story, it's kind of like quite surreal. And when I think back to some of those moments in the early days, if only you knew what was ahead, it would have made it so much easier. I thought that I split with my boyfriend, who I'd been with for 4 years, and I thought I'd be on my own forever and never be able to meet anyone, and then probably never have children. I knew that I really wanted children, and then I didn't know how I'd ever replace eventing, because it's huge commitment, dedication, and a lot of adrenaline involved. So I thought, how am I going to fill these gaps? Just couldn't see a way through sometimes. And so when I think of like the things I've done since, I just think it's really bizarre. It was an end of a chapter, but it's the start of the next chapter, and it kind of gave me that opportunity really to have 2 chances at life, to explore and find new things to do, and it's actually been really exciting.
Now, I'm just looking at your what you've done. Obviously you've done the London Marathon and the Paralympic cauldron, and then in 2013 you completed a 400-mile hand cycle.
I started hand cycling after the London Marathon. I don't know why I left it so long, because it's a big part of my life now, just to get me outside, the fresh air, which, obviously with a riding background, I was always outside before my accident, and just keeping myself fit and healthy. So, I'm always out on my bike if I've got child-free time and, chance to do it. But that's when I started and decided to do a hand cycle challenge, along with visiting schools. And it's also when my speaking started. So it was all for the charity. And then I did a lot of schools and started getting corporate bookings after that. So really, London Marathon put my whole life again in another direction, because I never thought I'd have a career as a speaker. In fact, there's nothing I would have hated more when I was at school. I hated reading the line out of a textbook. So, but love it. I love it more than I did being a chiropractor. So again, it's something that I wouldn't change back. And it all started really from doing that cycle challenge and kind of making myself go into school when I was offered the chance. I thought, God, I don't like doing that, and probably told myself a million times that, it wasn't for me, and it scared me. And then I thought, no, what's the worst that can happen? Made myself go and do it, and loved it. The kids' reactions made me come up with the next challenge of visiting a load of schools and cycling.
Yeah, and I mean, again, then, so you raised £85,000 on the 400-mile hand cycle challenge. Then you did the Great North Run whilst you were 16 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, that was a hard one. I was offered, well, what happened is, after the London Marathon, it was about 4 years later, and the Nichols Foundation, which is a charity I do most of my fundraising for, had got one place in the 10k vitality race in London. And I thought, maybe I could do one more, about got over the London Marathon, and I thought I could really challenge myself and do 10k in a day, so just over 6 miles. I did about 1.5 miles a day on the London Marathon, and that was taking me all day. So I emailed the charity, and they were keen for me to do it, but the organisers banned me. They said I've got an unfair advantage. I thought, a bit odd. I know why I'm going to come last. Anyway,
unfair advantage.
Oh, God. Yeah, exactly. Anyone would think I was going to win it. Anyway, got a lot of national media because of the ban, and I did go and do that as an unofficial competitor, and raised about £10,000 doing it. But because of the media, all the other races started inviting me to do theirs, and the Great North Run was one of them. And it was one that I always fancied doing, and they offered a slightly different way round. They said I could have a 5-day head start, which meant if I did it, I'd beat Mo Farah. And I thought, well, not many people have done that. So
Wow.
I quite fancied actually finishing on the race day. So I jumped at the chance of doing it. And then I was pregnant, and I felt so rubbish all summer because I got really bad morning sickness, and I really did struggle on.
But you did it.
But I did it. I got there, and I just kept thinking of what I did in London. Every step would get me a step closer. But the hardest thing is I had a deadline of when I could get there by. Whereas on the London Marathon, it was like going to take as long as it could take. It didn't matter if it was 18 days, 16 days. But I'd got 5 days, and I spent some of it in A&E because I got a rub because I had to sit down so often, and it was quite a journey. But the harder the struggle, the more glorious the triumph. And I got there, and I was pleased to see my wheelchair.
And then, because that's not enough, the next year you got an MBE.
Yeah, it was the end of that year, just actually after the Great North Run, I got a letter saying I'd been awarded an MBE. So I was obviously very excited, and sent it back, and I put on it, please avoid end of February for the investiture, babies due. Now, the investiture is usually between I think it's end of January and July. So anyway, I put that end of February, avoid. And I got a formal bit of post brought to me while I was in hospital, waiting for Chloe to arrive because I had complications. And I opened it, and it was investiture 28th of February. Baby was due 26th. So I thought, God, I'm going to have a baby in Buckingham Palace. But anyway, Chloe decided to arrive 5 weeks early so that we were there 2 days from her due date. And yeah, it was just an amazing day with my family and some friends to celebrate, really, of the journey that I've been on.
You're just incredible. And of course you haven't stopped there. So now you are you became the first paralysed woman in the UK to get your motorcycle race license, and you completed the Great South Run in your robotic suit in a 24-hour walk.
Yeah.
Then you also, in 2018, smashed the marathon record and managed to complete the Manchester Marathon in 9 days. And then you also rode charity laps at the British Superbike Series, and you're now becoming a pilot.
Yeah, keep myself busy. Yes, I did the Great South and Manchester after the Great North, and once again, the support when I was out there, the people donating, it's very special. From my accident, I've learned, how amazing people can be. And yeah, the best thing about being so slow is you can get a PB by day. So I knocked off a lot of time from the London one. I was stronger and fitter and a bit more used to the suit. But it's been a brilliant bit of kit for fundraising, and through all those events, it's raised a lot of money to help cure paralysis. But I can't say I love walking, or I'll sit here wishing I could walk. It's, there's far more things to do that give you a sense of freedom that is actually very restrictive and painfully slow. So yeah, I knew that the door was really closing on what I could do with the suit. So looking for more opportunities and things that came my way, and the motorbikeing was one thing. And then more recently learned to fly, and I've now done 3 solo flights. So hoping I can get my license soon, but I just need the weather to be a little bit better, because for solo flights, they won't send you up if it's too windy, and it's got to be perfect conditions. And even the hot still days that you can have in the summer, they're too bumpy because of the thermals. So it is just looking for the right weather now so that I can crack on and get my license.
And are you finding that the super bikes and the flying are kind of giving you that adrenaline buzz, as you say, when you're eventing and you're in the start box and you're ready to go and you're clearing these enormous terrifying fences, you get a big buzz? She says, I used to do unaffiliated eventing, it's not the same league, but even that you get a buzz.
Yeah,
but is that what's kind of drawn you in this direction to these things? Is it for that adrenaline buzz initially?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a big loss to me when you're used to competing and being out your comfort zone, at the events. And it's not just the big events. Riding a young horse around a pre-novice can be more nerve-wracking than riding an experienced horse around a bigger track. It doesn't matter what level, you get that buzz and that excitement. And, I thought, how am I ever going to get that again? But I can tell you what, being Velcroed onto a super bike is pretty nerve-wracking, riding around track days with 40 others, mainly men and able-bodied, and once you're out there, you wouldn't know I was paralysed. And I never did it before my accident, so I've had to learn, knowing I can't put my feet down, and I haven't always got it right. I've fallen quite a few times, but kept getting back up and have improved. And my ultimate aim is to ride a lap of the Isle of Man TT course one day, and I did get offered that chance, and then it was postponed, and then COVID and stuff. So I'm hoping one day they'll invite me to go and do that as a charity lap, and I'd love that.
That would be awesome. I was going to say, what's in store for you moving forward? Because I imagine that COVID's been it's been a blooming nightmare for everyone, let's be honest. But with as you said, you're doing a lot of speaking now, and I imagine that not being able to physically go out to places has made you have to really pivot in how you carry, do that line of work that you do.
Yeah, no, it's a big change, but I think having gone through a bigger change, I learned a valuable lesson back in 2007, and it's focus on what you can do, not what you can't. So, life did change last year with COVID. So I thought, well, obviously the big thing was I've got the children at home. So I had to, help Maisie a bit. And Chloe was around. Preschools then did open for a bit, which was brilliant, because obviously it's so much harder with a young one than Maisie can get on and do her work. So I had the children here, which was my main job, but I also got to write my second book, which I hadn't had a chance to do. So I've got that done, but I won't publish it until I've got my pilot license, because I need to finish that challenge first. And then, my events moved onto a virtual platform. I'd never heard of Teams and Zoom until COVID, and now use it a lot. And I'm starting to get some inquiries for in-face events again. But I think, some virtual events will stay, and it worked really well. There's bits I missed about meeting people when I go out to my events, but it also meant that I could do it from home, have a flying lesson the same day, and be there for the children, picking them up from school or whatever. So it's got its advantages, and yes, it's kept me pretty busy, and I got all my flying, the written exams done while I could. So it's really thinking of how am I going to use this time to the best, and not think of all the things that we could have been doing that were cancelled. Like I was meant to be doing the London Marathon again, and then that was cancelled and stuff. And yes, there's no point in dwelling on that. It was easier than my accident, because we're all in the same boat. When I had my accident, it was like lockdown, but everyone else's lives carried on, and it was just mine. And I felt like I was never really going to come out of it. Obviously, I did in terms of what I did, what I've gone on and done, but I was always going to stay paralysed unless there was a cure in the future. So I think it probably helped me deal with it.
I guess as well, the beauty of Zoom and Teams and all the other things is that now you can speak to people all over the world. So more people get to hear your story and have the opportunity to kind of follow you and get behind what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I had one for financial company De Vere, and they got offices all over the world. So actually people were joining that you wouldn't do that in an in-person event, and they found it really beneficial to be able to hold these meetings on Zoom. And imagine if we'd had like COVID, when there was no internet, and what we've got now with the technology, it would be so different. I do worry about the technology side and the internet for my children, because I think there's a lot bad about it as well, but in terms of what we can do on it, it has its good sides. I just hope I can keep my girls off it for as long as possible.
Oh, bless you. So what does the sort of future hold for you, and whether it's from a speaking point of view? Obviously we need to talk about the book. I've got that written down in a big circle around it, because you've had a book published and you've got the second one, which I didn't know about until a few seconds ago. So what does what can we expect to see from you in the short term and longer term future?
Yeah, so my goal is to keep raising money. I'm doing the London Marathon in 6 weeks again, but this time I'm doing it in my day wheelchair. And because the Isle of Man TT lap that I was going to do was cancelled around the same time as that, so I think that was towards the end of 2018, I was had a phone call from the London Marathon organisers saying I've been awarded the Spirit of London Award, where they picked 26 of their different competitors through all the years and awarded them with this Spirit of London. And along with this came a guaranteed entry, so that would have been for the 2020 London Marathon.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's really hard to get into the London Marathon, I can't turn it down. So I took it on, and what I decided to do to make it still motorbike related, because that's what I was meant to have been doing, I thought I'll push around it in all my motorcycling gear, the leathers, the helmet, the boots, which are really heavy and restrictive, and it feels like I'm pushing in deep mud. So
Oh.
that's what I'm doing. I've got to push 15 miles tomorrow, and it's hard work. I used to think a mile was a long way to go in a wheelchair. So I've built up my strength, and I'm doing all right, but then I put the motorcycling gear and it doesn't feel all right. But
Make it harder.
My aim is to get there when there's still a finish line, but it's going to be really tight. I think it's 50-50 to whether I can get there or not. But I'm doing it for a charity that helps actually disabled children for this one. It helps them get mobility equipment like lightweight wheelchairs. You don't just get given a wheelchair when you have an accident or an illness. They're about £4,000 or £5,000, and children obviously grow in and outgrow and need them changing. And I just can't imagine what it'd be like to have a disabled child and not be able to provide them with the best mobility equipment that actually changes their life. So that's a real incentive for me to take on the challenge and keep going when I'm tired.
So how long do you reckon it's going to take you?
I try and work it out, and it's really hard to know, because just going that further distance, and if my arms stand it, because with the leathers being so tight around my arms and shoulders, it is like someone's holding you back all the time. But I depends what start I go from for the London Marathon. I haven't heard yet. You get a little bit longer if it's the green start, which I'm hoping for, and I was last time. I'll be out of over the start line probably 40 minutes quicker than the other starts. So that would just give me that, I could be a few miles up the road, and I need that. So I'm hoping I can get there by the cut-off times. I think the finish line finishes at about 7 p.m.
Right.
But the road closures, they do it on like a rolling road, opening the roads again. So if I get put on the pavements, it could take me a long, long time. So it's a bit the unknown, but I'm going to give it my all and try and stay on closed roads and get there for the finish line. That's my plan, but we shall see.
I mean, if anyone can do it, it's you, isn't it? Let's just look at your history. If anyone can do it, you've got this.
I don't know, but I'll give it my all. And if it doesn't go to plan, I'll keep going, and I'll get there when I get there, providing I don't get any injuries that stop me.
And your second book, so when did your first book come out?
So I wrote my first book after the cycle challenge. So it came out in 2014, and it's been on my list of things to do the second book. But just with young children and busy career and everything else, fundraising, I just never had chance until COVID came along.
Yeah. And as you say, that'll be out when you are a pilot, so you can finish off the book, so we can keep an eye open for that as well. Yeah,
exactly. So I was hoping this autumn, but if the weather doesn't pick up soon, then it could be early next year. But yeah, so I've written about it kind of goes into a little bit what I did before my accident, to a brief a bit, just to give the people who haven't read the other one a bit more my background, and then just into various journeys, some of the challenges. My husband was diagnosed with severe OCD about 5 years ago, and that's been extremely challenging to live with for him. He got to rock bottom, and everyone would see him helping me on the challenges, and he's amazing out there, but behind closed doors it's a very different situation. And everyone can see that I'm paralysed and I'm in a wheelchair, but you can't see when someone's got a mental illness, and you're almost like living two different lives in a way, from what people see when you have them and what's really going on at home. And Dan's been brilliantly open about it and is happy to talk about it. And he's actually joined me on some of my virtual events for the Q&A on some with a mental health theme, because obviously we've got what I went through, and I had dark times and how I got through that with my injury, and then what Dan's gone through, but they're both very different kind of for different situations. Like if you saw Dan, he's fit, healthy, well and everything, but it doesn't mean you can't be struggling, and he really wasn't. He's a lot better now, but we've gone through a lot of treatment. And I think the biggest difference is that I am quite open. I spoke to my friends when I was down, my family, and Dan didn't when he was struggling, and I think that can make a big difference. You've got to talk.
Absolutely. I think, as you say, mental illness is very challenging. There's been quite a lot about how men don't kind of vocalize the issues they're having as much. You've got a few things at play there for Dan as well, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. So the book's going to be called The Bigger Picture, and it's really about everything. Some of the things I faced, and then bits with Dan, and than what we've gone through there. So it'd be a mix of all sorts of stuff.
I think that by being open, yourself and Dan, it's like learning from people, reading their stories, seeing how they've overcome things, turned them around, is just so important. It's so brave of people like yourself and Dan to do, but it's so important to people who are suffering in silence, who aren't speaking, getting the help, because they can see it can be done, or that there's just that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I think, it definitely is. And I think there's quite a lot going on, to get people to do that. But I know when Dan was at his worst, I felt very unsure of how to handle it. And it was extremely lonely and heartbreaking. And, he was obviously suffering, but as a result, he'd be bad-tempered, and he was just really difficult to live with. And yet we'd got little Maisie at the time, and, you just don't know what to do. I felt pretty trapped, and it was hard for us both. And yeah, if we hadn't got treatment for him, we wouldn't be together now, and we wouldn't have Chloe. It saved us, really.
Gosh. And as you say, now are you kind of working together in some of the talks you're doing? I know you said that he gets involved with the Q&A from that point of view, but are you sort of working together in more ways like that?
Yeah, he's been part of the Q&A, so I bring his story in if it fits the theme. Sometimes the theme, it varies what key points the client wants. But yeah, he's been involved in some. He's actually taking part in the London Marathon as well, and another friend. They are jogging alongside me or walking when I get tired and slow. Maybe having to run if there's any downhills. That will make them. Anyway, they're dressed. Wait for it. They're dressed as my grid girls. So Dan is actually taking on the London Marathon in high heels, like these boots with big chunky, they're chunky heels, but nevertheless they're a few inches high. I can't wait. He's got the whole outfit, the skirt, the boobs, the wig. Oh, can't wait.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
I'm going to wax his legs and his tummy because he's got like this crop top. So I'm sorry, but I think the night before the London Marathon, he's just going to have to do a bit of waxing with you boys.
Oh wow. Oh, I hope you get some exceptional press coverage for that, just because you've had to wax your husband, really, beyond anything else. So if people want to, find out more about you, but if do you take on you say you do speaking events, but is that just for corporate events or schools, or is there anyone that's interested in having a motivational speaker?
Yeah, it is. It's been for a range of things. So I'm thinking with the London Marathon coming out, I'm going to go and visit a few schools for children with disabilities, and I'll enjoy hearing their story of how Whiz Kids, the charity that I'm doing it for, has helped them, and also teaching them to focus on their abilities. We don't need to hear the word disabled all the time. It sounds quite negative, but they've all got abilities. So I might go in and speak to them about my journey, and so that's the plan. And I have done a lot of school visits, so I do less these days just because I'd just be out all the time, and most of my speaking is my career now, and corporate events. But sometimes there's tickets available, like Osberton. Yes. That's a ticket event, so anyone can go to that, and it's like business lunch, and should be really good fun. And also I'm running an auction alongside the London Marathon to raise money for Whiz Kids the week before. So during Osberton and during the marathon weekend until the Monday, I'm going to have an auction online. Already I've been given some really good prizes. I've got a week in Austria, in the Austrian Alps.
Oh wow.
I've got aerobatic flying experience, and they're going to give me a go. I'm going to do loop-de-loop. God, I better take a sick bucket. And yeah, all sorts of different prizes, and a show jump and horsey ones as well. So I'm going to, over the next kind of 4 weeks, I'm hoping to drum up even more different ones, motorbikeing, flying, equestrian related, anything really. If anyone's got any prizes they can give, and make this auction a brilliant auction, and helping just a fantastic charity. And it's not just for mobility equipment. They actually work with the children to show them that they, what you can do, and bring them kind of out of, kind of showing them, leading the way, and they turn into confident young adults and believing in themselves.
I love that. What would you say, if you had any kind of tips to share about from your whole journey, that have you got any sort of I know you've actually said a few things as been going along, and I've been like, that's such a cool way to look at it, such a cool thing. But obviously you've learned so much during this time. Are there any tips that you share with people to help them see outside of a situation, or to really push for their goals, or anything like that you share?
I'd say, I mean, we all have ups and downs, don't we? It's inevitable in life. And I'd say, don't let tough times define you, let them redefine you. So my accident, it's done exactly that. It's put me on new paths, things that I just wouldn't have done. So when we are, when we do face difficulties, obviously we don't bounce back straight away. Sometimes we have to go through a process of grieving on what we've lost, but gently persuade yourself to get out there and do new things, because it can give you, better things really from change. And the other thing I'd probably say is make an effort, not an excuse, because there's a million excuses we can find for everything, but sometimes just that bit of effort, and you always feel better for doing it.
You are such an inspiration. I was so excited when you said you'd come on this podcast, and I knew you'd done a lot of the things, but when I started reading up, I was like, oh my gosh, she's doing that. And of course, because it's been over quite a few years, it's just amazing everything you've achieved. If you hadn't had the accident, everything that you've achieved is just absolutely incredible. And I just genuinely such an inspiration. So tell us all the places people can find you online if they want to donate to the auction, if they want to follow you, if they want to give some money to sponsor you in some of the events that you're doing. Where can they find all this?
So on my website, which is claireschallenge.co.uk, it's got the Virgin Money giving page for my London Marathon, which is my kind of focus at the moment, for the next six weeks. Yeah, I think it's 6 weeks on Sunday. So yeah, and auction prizes for that. And social media, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So if they find me on there, I put quite a lot of my journey on and my flying things. And yeah, it'd be nice to hear from anyone if they'd like to get involved in any of the things I'm doing. I'm also doing the Great South Run 2 weeks after the London Marathon, if I can still move, where I'm taking a team with me. It's 10 miles, flat course. It's the one I did after the Great North Run. I did it over 24 hours, so I walked all night when I did that and finished at 10 a.m. on the Monday. But this time I'm pushing in my wheelchair, not in the motorbike leathers, but with a team of people who are raising a minimum of £100 for Nichols Spinal Injury Foundation. And yeah, we're basically going to have a really good weekend in Portsmouth. So it's good team feeling. And, we've got people walking it, got me pushing it. Some will be running it, some will get a good time. But the time doesn't matter. We've all got the same aim of just getting to the finish line and raising money to help others.
No, definitely. And just before I let you go and live your life, obviously you raise money for the Nichols Foundation, Whiz Kids, and are there any other charities that you are hugely passionate about that we need to go and do some more research on, because they're doing incredible things?
Yeah, I've done fundraising for other charities as well, but Whiz Kids has come about because of the London Marathon and do it in a wheelchair. That is my first fundraiser for them. Most of it is for the Nichols Foundation, because I truly believe that their research is pretty exciting for the future. And it's not just about walking again. That's the bit that people all see. It's about getting your bowel and bladder working, sensation, when you can't feel anything. Neck injuries, feeding themselves, dressing themselves, breathing for themselves. They couldn't even wipe their own tears away in hospital. It's way more important. So that's really where my passion has been throughout all my fundraising, is for this amazing charity. There's a small charity, and David Nichols would set the charity up. His son was paralysed in his gap year, and he dived into a sandbank in Bondi Beach and broke his neck. So David has the same passion as me for curing paralysis, and not a penny is wasted. And I love that charity, and I love doing work for them because he doesn't take a wage, and he's had a friend who was the CEO and he didn't take a wage. It's just a really special charity to support. And only just got involved with Whiz Kids, but again, they're a much bigger charity, which is different. But I love the work they do and making a difference to children's life, because disability doesn't mean that you can't have a happy and fulfilled life. Now, I wouldn't have believed that in the first year.
No, but crikey, haven't you proved that? I mean, I think you've done more in your life to date than most people do in their entire lives without any limitation, any physical limitation.
Thank you. I never thought I'd be able to do this stuff, but I'm forever grateful for the adaptations that are out there for me to be able to ride a motorbike. You know, that I change the gears with my left hand. Most people do it with their feet. Same with the microlight that I fly. It's got the adaptations in so that I can do it with just the use of my arms. You know, without this kit here, skiing and hand cycling, you know, things wouldn't be possible. And there's amazing charities that enable people to be able to go and fly, be able to go and ski, and do all these things. So yeah, it gives people those opportunities that struggle physically to be able to go and do it how you would have done, or if you were able-bodied.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Claire. That's been absolutely awesome, and I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks very much, Ria.